Right now, it is time to bring in Arthur Schwartz, the food maven. Arthur joins us on a Monday morning. We talk about food and more. He's also available on our on-demand page, robinhoodradio.com. Click on On Demand with Arthur Schwartz, the food maven. Before Arthur, I get to you. It was a upsetting moment for a lot of people. I posted on our Facebook page that Big W, and the Big W, the great barbecue place in Dover Plains, which has been running for 20 years, they decided to close yesterday. Not because of the pandemic, but because 20 years was enough and they just wanted to move on to other things. Arthur?
Good for them.
I got over 4,000 responses to that.
Oh, my.
I mean, because people just love that place. But I just want to give a tip of the cap to Big W Barbecue. They in Dover Plains, they did a hell of a job for 20 years.
Yeah, let me just remind all Big W's fans, it's not about them.
Yeah, that's right. That's what somebody said.
Somebody wants to move on.
Yeah.
That's about them. So, today is Shavuos, which is not I don't think, among secular Jews, a much celebrated holiday, but I always am attached to this holiday because it meant, when I was a kid, that my grandmother was going to make a production number of making blintzes. I'll get to that in a minute. But the traditional foods, plural, of Shavuos are dairy food items. Now, I don't care that much about Shavuos. What it is that it commemorates the giving of the Torah. Moses came down from the mountain, presented the Ten Commandments, and one of the things that a very religious, observant Jews did last night was stay up all night studying in honor of all this. So dairy, now there are many, many reasons. I'm laughing because most of them are silly, for why we eat dairy at the end of May. On the lunar calendar, which the Jewish calendar is, it's a little different, but it's always, I forget how many days after Passover. So Passover is the first of the spring holidays. So we're well into spring, as we're well into spring. And it is also, coincidentally, the beginning of a wheat harvest in the Holy Land. Not so holy these days. Anyway, but the real reason, as far as I'm concerned, is that this is the season that mammals are giving birth to their young and providing us with a lot of milk. The young, some of them, if they're lambs, could be eaten, and the mama doesn't need so much milk. The cows, of course, we raise for their milk. And this is the time of the year they give birth and have the most milk. So if you have the most milk, you've got to do something with it, and that means you're going to eat it in one way or another. Now, modern-day people have huge repertoire of dishes made with milk, which in Jewish kosher lingo is dairy, because meat products, meaning the flesh of animals, except for fish, and dairy are not allowed to be combined. And in fact, there is a tradition among some people on Shavuos to have the dairy meal in commemoration of the holiday, but then to have a meat course, let's say, after that. But you have to wait. It depends on your community. A minimum of 30 minutes, could be 3 hours before you can finish the meal. So for me, though, Shavuos always meant my grandmother made blintzes. Now, we did not make sweet blintzes. In fact, I think the first time I ate a sweet blintz, it was my mother brought them home from the bakery, which had started to make their own blintzes, and they made cheese blintze with I don't know, in English Yiddish it's blintz and blintzes. I think in actual Yiddish it's blintzen, plural. In any case, you can't eat just one. So what a blintz is a crepe, literally a crepe, like a French crepe, filled with, in our household, it was either cheese with salt and pepper, not sweet, or my favorite, potato. And that was mashed potatoes made with lots of fried onions. And in this case, because it was a dairy meal, you could fry them in butter. And so that was delicious. Mashed potatoes with onions fried in butter. I'm getting hungry thinking about it. And then it's wrapped in a crepe, folded in a particular way, sort of like a Chinese egg roll, a very neat package. And then that is fried in butter. In our house, they were always sautéed in a skillet with butter. So butter on butter, cheese and sour, and then you topped it with sour cream. So that was really a dairy fest on potatoes, and the same thing with the cheese one. Now, my grandmother was a great cook, and she also was a glamorous woman, and she had very long nails. She had a very long manicure. I always say to relate, like Barbara Streisand does even today. I guess it's stylish now to have a long manicure. In any case, my grandmother would take down her nails just to make blintzes because the blintz had to be thin enough that you could see your fingers through it. And if it's that thin, it's also susceptible to tearing if you have very long fingernails. So she would actually take down her nails, I don't know how much, but she always said that. And we would also put the leaves into the dining room table so that it was an enormously long table covered with not a fancy tablecloth. Maybe she even had one reserved for this purpose. Knowing my grandmother, she probably did. And a banquet-sized cloth was put on, and this was the table that you turned out. The dining room table was only steps away from the stove, so it was like another sort of room. We used to call them dinettes. It was off the kitchen, but it was a nice-sized kitchen. It was a nice-sized dining room. So turn out the crepes on top of the tablecloth to let them cool. Eventually, they could get stacked. And making the crepes was an all-day production. We made hundreds, I'm not exaggerating, of crepes. And then the next day is the day that we actually filled and shaped the blintzes because the onions took a long time. Chop up onions, you let them sweat a while, then you let them caramelize, and then you stir them into mashed potatoes. In this case, because it's all about dairy, if you want to add cream, you can. These days, my grandmother never would do that, but it would just be potatoes and lots of onions and salt and pepper. And you put a lump of this on a crepe, and you fold over the sides, and then you roll them. And that was the second day. And, of course, the cheese. The cheese is easy to... I should look up a recipe while I'm sitting here. For cheese blintz, see if I have. I know it's in New York. It's in Jewish home cooking. I know that. So, and it's two kinds of cheese, if I remember. A lot of people put cream cheese, mix in cream cheese into their a blintz cheese filling. We never did that. But I've had them, and they've been very good. Of course, they're a little bit sweet because cream cheese is a little bit sweet. But it's interesting about Philadelphia brand cream cheese, which is made by Kraft Foods these days. It's not really a Jewish concept. It's a German concept, and it was meant to be an American copy of Neuchâtel, which you can still buy, which is a kind of cream cheese. I always thought Neuchâtel was Swiss. I still think it's Swiss. But in any case, it's interesting that a little bit of trivia for everybody. The word in German for cream cheese is Schmierkäse.
Schmierkäse.
Smear cheese. And, in New York, people still say, I have a bagel with a schmear. In fact, isn't there? There's even a commercial,
yes.
a Philadelphia cream cheese commercial, where the guy's a
schmear,
whatever,
a chameleon. Yeah.
He, like a sommelier.
Yeah.
Yeah, a schmierelier or something. So yeah, it comes from the German Yiddish, and also So it's not exactly a Jewish cheese. However, its invention in the late 19th century. By the way, not in Philadelphia, although there is a Philadelphia cream cheese. I'll get to that maybe some other day. It's another story. But no, Philadelphia cream cheese was made in this town just north. Actually, I think it's near Amenia. I forget what town it is, but it's right by Amenia over there. And a dairy farmer came up with this cheese. Eventually, in the 1930s, it was bought by Kraft and became a national brand. Philadelphia brand cream cheese became national, and it was popularized in the Jewish community by Al Jolson, who had a Kraft-sponsored radio program. And Mr. Kraft said, Al, you got to incorporate our products in your program. And by the way, that continued into Arthur Schwartz on WOR, where I was encouraged to incorporate commercials into the program. But I only did it with things that I would spend my own money on. In any case, getting back to Al Jolson, he wrote a song called Bagels and Yachts, and of course cream cheese. So that's sort of what popularized the whole deal. In any case, back to Blintz's. The thing that I'm craving, though, by the way, I'm not eating Blintz's because it's crepes, and that's carbohydrates, and I can't eat potatoes, and they're my favorite. But I can eat a cheesecake if I sweeten it with an artificial sweetener. And I'm going to try that today. And there is a cheesecake, by the way, not a Jewish cheesecake at all, but an Italian-American cheesecake made with ricotta that is the one that if I'm craving anything, I'm craving that. And it's not that sweet to start. And I'm willing, by the way, to eat a little bit of that. In fact, I'm going to... you asked about my stove off air. My stove seems to be working perfectly.
All right.
I'm very happy with my stove. I'm learning more about it every day. And besides this cheesecake, or this ricotta cheesecake, the other thing that I'm sort of craving is a cheese souffle. And I wasn't craving a cheese souffle until I thought about what I might make to test the oven. And a cheese souffle, I think, is if it can cook a cheese souffle the way I want it to, then we can say. And then I only have to test the broiler. I have not used the broiler. I never have much. What to say. Expectations for a broiler, because almost they never ever work to broil anything except maybe to brown the top of something, But anyway, back to cheesecake. I can't find this. I can't believe I didn't prepare this recipe for you. But this cake, this ricotta Italian cheesecake, is. Oh, you know what? I think this is in New York. I think this is in New York City food. This cake, because it is so delicious, and it comes. I made one once while I was staying on Cecilia's farm, and it was sitting on the counter, cooling, and Ettore, her son, a grown man who should know better, but supposed to eat, ate the entire cake. So, yeah, and I'm looking all over for the cake. I'm thinking, well, maybe somebody put it in the refrigerator. I don't know. And then finally we discover, and he thought it was a souffle. and that it was supposed to be eaten warm, and nobody was doing that, so he took it upon himself.
That's a good excuse
to do that. Yeah. So I wish I could find this recipe. For some reason, this is going to be my thing today. I can see this already. So cheesecake. Let's try searching on cheesecake. No, but a lot of cheesecake recipes in my file. It's one of the things that I've always loved, and I'm not eating. And if I had to recommend another cheesecake, I'll find this recipe. Next week I'll give you the ricotta cheesecake recipe. I do remember that it's the 3-pound container ricotta and an inordinate amount of eggs, like 9 eggs, and maybe not that much sugar. And you whip it all up. So it's not one of those lumpy ricotta cakes in the end. And it is very good, as Ed today discovered. It is very good warm. And unlike a souffle, it won't flatten out. But this is a cheesecake recipe from my distant past. And it's Craig Claiborne's recipe for a hazelnut cheesecake. I have a soft spot for hazelnuts. So this calls for 1.5 cups of this is the whole hard part of making this recipe. Shelled, of course. You can buy them shelled. Toasted. You can buy them toasted and hulled as well. But I always do it myself. It's something to do while watching the news. You put the hazelnuts on a flat sheet, and put them in a 350-degree oven until you can smell them. I don't know how else to give that direction, but until they start having an aroma. Take them out. It's like 10-15 minutes. Take them out of the oven, let them cool, and then put them in a kitchen towel and rub the skins off. You don't have to rub every last drop of skin off, but believe me, most of the skin will just come off. And if some sticks, that's fine. So when you're ready to make the cheesecake, so that now you have your prepared nuts. When you're ready, and they should be fully cool before you grind them. I put them through a rotary nut grinder because they come out nice and fluffy that way. But you can do them in the food processor. Just be careful, don't make them pasty. Now, this gets baked in an 8-inch cake pan, the deep kind. Now, I don't use a spring form. I mean, I do use a spring form, but, truthfully, Claiborne doesn't want you to. I'm not going to say anything. So you butter the inside, you sprinkle it with graham and cracker crumbs, or breadcrumbs if you don't want the sweet graham cracker, but actually they add a nice crunch and sweetness. And you're not making a graham cracker crust. You're just sprinkling it with graham crackers. And then you take your filling ingredients, which are 2 pounds of cream cheese. That's 4 blocks, 8-ounce blocks of cream cheese, a half of a cup of heavy cream. Can I say this is super duper keto friendly? 4 eggs, and you beat it all up until it's fluffy. However, the original recipe calls for 1 3/4 of a cup of sugar. That's a lot of sugar, but it's after all an 8-inch cake. So you can have a sliver, and you're okay. So that's all you need. This is a super duper rich cake. So now you have your ground nuts, you have your beaten up cream cheese, cream, eggs, sugar, and also a little vanilla. A teaspoon of vanilla usually does it. And this will bring out the flavor of the hazelnuts. Now, you may well ask, why don't I use almond extract? Because Arthur does not like almond extract. Maybe a drop, literally. But if you're going to use almond, which will bring out this flavor of the hazelnuts, please just make it a drop. And then, once this is all beaten up, you add the nuts. I use a rubber spatula to fold and stir the nuts into the cheese, and then pour that into your prepared 8-inch cake pan. And now you're going to make a bath. And then you do this with a lot of cheesecakes because it's a kind of custard after all, and you want it to cook gently and evenly. And this does not necessarily prevent the top from cracking, which is some people have a bugaboo about that. I don't. Some cheesecakes, are just going to crack. One of the reasons a cheesecake may crack, by the way, is that it's sticking to the sides of the pan, and and getting a little bit more done at the edge, as cakes will, than in the center, and it'll pull open the middle. So if you really want to be crack preventive, after about, I don't know, a half an hour, let's say an hour, because this cake bakes for 2 hours inside a water bath. So when it's about halfway done, you can take a very sharp, small knife and go all around the edge to make sure it's not sticking. Anyway, after it's baked for a couple of hours, leave it in the oven for at least another hour, and then you can let it. Then you can lift it out of the water bath and let it cool on a rack, and it should cool for a minimum of 2 hours. So this is one of those things that's best made one day and eaten the next day, I think. This is maybe the most luscious cheesecake that I know. The recipe was hugely popular when Craig Claiborne printed it, and I don't remember when that was, but it had to be the early 1970s. And I do remember, for some reason, this caused a rage. And in fact, the pan that he wanted you to use, which is this cake pan that is not a springform pan, 3 inches high, was not a common pan. So you had to go to Bridge Kitchenware. Do you remember Bridge Kitchenware on East 52nd Street? They ended up on East 52nd Street. They'd been in a couple of other places first. Well, Fred Bridge, the owner of Bridge Kitchenware, was the place for chefs and restaurants to get their kitchenware, as well as some tableware. And Fred was encyclopedic about kitchenware. And you had to get this pan from Fred Bridge to make the hazelnut cheesecake. And Fred Bridge was not known for his politeness. In fact, he was known to be rude. He was known to make grown men cry if they asked for the wrong item. And their wife sent them in for something, and Fred would correct them. In any case, you had to go to Fred Bridge to buy this pan in those days. Nowadays, I see them all over the place because I think cheesecake is just one of those super popular things to make. Now, I'm going to have to spend the morning looking for this other cake, this ricotta. For some reason, my computer doesn't want to tell me where it is.
I want to go back to your to crepes because
I'm
familiar with crepes. I put them like this. Crepes are the thinnest. Blintzes are a little thicker than crepes. And my grandmother used to make a Hungarian dish that was like those two, but it was even thicker. And I experienced them from three different. I experienced crepes from three different ethnic backgrounds, and they truly are. You can have them for dessert, breakfast, lunch, dinner, whatever.
No. Crepes are so
Yeah.
We have to talk about crepes on what's the pancake, the Christian pancake holiday.
I don't know.
So no, here's my formula for crepes. Now, this is dairy, remember. If I was making Jewish crepes, not for Shavuos, I might not use any milk. I might just use water. But the ones that I make for Shavuos are a cup of flour, a cup of milk, a half a cup of cold water, salt, quarter teaspoon, half teaspoon, 2 eggs, and 2 tablespoons of melted butter, and you just mix it all up together, adding the butter last, and let it stand for 20 minutes, a half an hour at least, and then you can start making your crepes. And my grandmother made very thin crepes, so, but I understand what you're saying. And her cheese filling was Now, what we called pot cheese in those days disappeared for a good 20, 25 years, but has now made a comeback. And there is sometimes labeled large curd cottage cheese. And I use large curd cottage cheese, or pot cheese, 2 cups, a quarter of a cup of sour cream, and if you have to add sugar, a couple tablespoons of sugar, no more. And then you have to bind it with an egg. Now, another possible filling is taking farmer cheese, which is a drier version of a cottage cheese / pot cheese, and thinning that out with a little bit more sour cream than a quarter of a cup. So you can, and as I said, some people put cream cheese in their cheese filling for blintzes. Use a lot of butter. I don't know. Shavuos means butter to me. On the other hand, it could also mean macaroni and cheese.
Macaroni and cheese. Well, all I know is that when you say crepes, every religion, every ethnicity has them. They're called different things.
Right, pancakes. You know, in Italian, it's crespelle, and that's crepes. And by the way, if they didn't have pork in them, and you could leave out the pork, I have a great crespelle recipe in Naples at Table, and it's presented in a very decorative way. Let's say you make these crepes filled with cheese, well, ricotta, and then other diced cheese and grated cheese. And you, as I said, you could leave out the pork, but I'm sure there's some salami or ham in there, diced fine. And after you roll up the crepes, you cut them in half on a diagonal, and you put them standing up with the point up in a baking dish, and you top them with tomato sauce, and then you eat like a king.
All right. Well, I'm hungry now.
Hungry.
Yeah, I'm hungry now. I'm not.
Yeah, well, that's the whole point, isn't it? I mean, the great thing is we all have to eat every day.
Yes.
unless you're intermittent fasting.
That's right, intermittent fasting.
A lot of people are.
I know, it's a big thing nowadays. Big thing.
Isn't it a big thing? I've tried it, didn't work.
Doesn't work.
I mean, really, I'm on some kind of plateau again. It happens. And I've tried to pull myself out of it in every which way, but it hasn't worked so far.
Yeah, in the last 2 weeks, I've only lost a pound. But you know what?
Yeah, well, that's it.
In another 2 weeks, I'll get on the scale, and all of a sudden I'll be down 4 pounds. So it all evens out.
Lucky you.
All right, Arthur, I'll speak to you next week.
Ciao.
Take care. Arthur Schwartz, the Food Maven, here on The Breakfast Club on Robin Hood Radio. Underwriting support for Arthur Schwartz, the Food Maven, John Andrews Restaurant on the Hillsdale Road in South Egremont, 413-528-3467, on the web, jarestaurant.com. Rubiners Cheesemongers and Grocers on Main Street in Great Barrington, 413-528-0488, rubiners.com. Hillsdale Home Chef, more information, 518-325-7000, hgshomechef.com.